felt like every moment stretched on for hours. My mind was stuck in a loop of disbelief, fury, and helplessness. I wanted to scream at both of them. I wanted to make them hurt like they were hurting me. But every time I opened my mouth to say something, nothing came out. How do you confront your best friend for stabbing you in the back, your wife for tearing apart your life, your family? It's like I didn't have the words. Instead, I kept quiet, at least to their faces. But inside, I was plotting. I needed to know more. I needed to be sure, even though deep down I already was. The next few days, I kept adding to my surveillance. I installed a camera in the garage too, right above where the car was parked. That way, I'd have footage when Emily came home, and I'd know if Aaron came over when I wasn't there. I even added another camera in the living room, hiding it behind some family photos. I was going overboard, but I didn't care. I had to be ready for whatever came next. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal around the kids. Sarah and Tyler were so innocent, so unaware of the storm that was brewing inside me. I couldn't let them see their dad falling apart. So I forced myself to smile, to act like things were fine when they weren't. Emily, though, she was different. The more I watched her, the more I noticed the subtle changes in her behavior. She was quieter, more distant. She'd come home from work, kiss me on the cheek, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. And she kept checking her phone, like she was waiting for a message, waiting for something, or someone. I kept playing along. Even when Aaron came over that Friday night for what was supposed to be a guy's night, I didn't say a word. I just sat there watching him closely, pretending I was enjoying the game we had on TV. But all I could think about was the footage I'd seen, him in my car with my wife. "Dude, you all right?" he asked, clapping me on the shoulder. The nerve of him to even touch me. "Yeah, just tired," I mumbled. "Long week at work." He laughed it off, calling me an old man for not being able to keep up anymore. I laughed too, but inside I was raging. He had no idea how close he was to getting knocked out right then and there, but I kept my cool. For now, I wanted more than just anger. I wanted proof that would make them both pay for what they were doing. And when it came, it hit me like a freight train. The next afternoon, I got an alert on my phone from the GPS. Emily was on her way home. And as usual, she had taken a detour. But this time, instead of heading toward some random spot on the map, she was going to Aaron's house. I could feel the blood drain from my face as I stared at the little red dot moving on the screen. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone. What was she doing there? Was this the first time? Or had it been happening for longer than I realized? I rushed out to my car, not even thinking about what I would do when I got there. I just needed to see it for myself, needed to know for sure. The drive felt like an eternity, every second ticking away like a bomb in my chest. When I finally pulled up to Aaron's place, I saw her car parked in the driveway. And then I saw them, through the front window, standing way too close to each other in his living room. They were laughing like they didn't have a care in the world, like they weren't destroying mine. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head. Part of me wanted to barge in there, throw open the door, and drag Aaron out by his collar. But the other part, the part that had been quietly planning, knew there was a better way. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. This time, I wasn't just going to catch them. I was going to record every second of it. I zoomed in through the window and started filming. The way they looked at each other, the way her hand rested on his chest. It was sickening. It was enough. I stopped recording and leaned back in my seat, staring at the footage I had just captured. This was it. This was all the proof I needed. But it wasn't enough. Not for me. Not yet. The next morning, I left the house before Emily even woke up. I couldn't stand the sight of her pretending like everything was fine anymore. I drove for hours, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge, betrayal, and how to make them both pay. But no matter how many scenarios I played out in my head, nothing felt right. Nothing felt satisfying enough. And then I remembered something. A cabin. Aaron's cabin, out in the woods. We'd been there a few times, back when we were still friends, back when I thought I could trust him. He always said it was his little retreat, where he could get away from the world. I knew what I had to do, I spent the next few days making preparations. I gathered what I needed, made sure the kids would be staying with Emily's parents for the weekend, and then I waited. Waited for the perfect moment to set my plan in motion. It was late that Friday when Emily told me she was heading out to grab drinks with some coworkers. I knew she was lying. She didn't even try to make it sound convincing. That's when I made my move. I followed her just as I had before. But this time I didn't need GPS or cameras. I knew exactly where she was going. And so did she. As she drove out to Aaron's cabin, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't about catching them anymore. I had all the proof I needed. This was about something more. Something final. Aaron's cabin was isolated, surrounded by thick trees, miles from anyone who could hear you scream. That thought played in my mind as I navigated the winding dirt road leading to his place. I parked far enough away that my car wouldn't be seen, then killed the engine. The night was dead quiet. The only sound the crunch of leaves beneath my feet as I approached the cabin. Through the window I saw them. They were sitting on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder, their legs entwined like they were some perfect, loving couple. I stood there for a moment, just watching, my chest tight with rage and disbelief. I was witnessing the life I had built being dismantled in front of me. It was as though I didn't exist anymore, like I had never been a part of her world. That was it. I couldn't watch anymore. I moved around to the back of the cabin, where Aaron always left a spare key under a loose brick by the steps. He'd shown it to me years ago, back when we were still close, before he became the man who betrayed me. I let myself in quietly, my footsteps barely making a sound on the wooden floors. They were still in the living room, completely unaware of my presence. I could hear their voices, their laughter. Each sound hit me like a punch to the gut. How could she do this? How could he? I stepped into the room, and for a moment, they didn't even notice me. They were too wrapped up in each other. But when Aaron finally glanced over and saw me standing there, his face went pale. Emily gasped and pulled away from him, her eyes wide with shock. "Ryan," she stammered, standing up quickly. "What are you? What am I doing here?" I interrupted, my voice cold, steady. "The better question is, what are you doing here? Emily? Aaron?" Neither of them spoke. They just stood there, frozen like deer caught in the headlights, their guilt written all over their faces. The air was thick with tension, the silence stretching out between us like a blade. "I've been watching," I continued, stepping further into the room. "I know everything. The car, the sneaking around, all the lies." Emily's eyes filled with tears, her lip trembling as she tried to find the right words. But there were no right words. There was nothing she could say that would undo what I had seen, what I knew. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered, her voice breaking. It just happened." Aaron stayed silent, staring at me like he was waiting for the punch to land. And God, I wanted to hit him. I wanted to smash his face in for all the years he'd spent pretending to be my friend, while he was sneaking behind my back with my wife. But I didn't. Not yet. "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I echoed, incredulous. "You've been lying to me for months. How long, Emily? How long have you been meeting him like this?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. Aaron finally found his voice. "Ryan, man, listen." "Shut up," I snapped, cutting him off. "Just shut up. You don't get to explain anything." I was shaking now, my fists clenched at my sides as I glared at both of them. All the rage, the betrayal, the pain. It was boiling over, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep it contained. "I trusted you," I said quietly, my voice thick with emotion. "Both of you. I let you into my home, Aaron. I thought you were my friend. And you," I turned to Emily, "you were supposed to be my wife, the mother of my children. How could you do this to me?" Tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't tell if they were out of guilt, or fear, or something else. Maybe all of it. She took a step toward me, reaching out as if to touch me, but I backed away. "Don't," I warned, my voice sharp. "Don't touch me. Ryan, please," she begged. I never wanted to hurt you. It was a mistake, I swear. It was just... What? Just what? I spat, my voice rising. Just sex? Just lies? Just throwing away our entire life together. Aaron shifted uncomfortably, but still he didn't speak. Coward. I thought you loved me, I said, my voice quieter now, the anger giving way to something else. Something deeper, something broken. I thought we were in this together, Emily. Was it all a lie? She shook her head desperately, choking on her sobs. No, it wasn't a lie. I do love you. I love you, Ryan. Please, you have to believe me. But I didn't. Not anymore. Whatever love had been there, it was poisoned now. Corroded by their betrayal, by every lie they had told, every secret they had kept. And I knew there was no going back. Aaron took a step forward, his hands raised as if to calm me down. Look, man, I'm sorry, all right? I messed up. We both did. But this doesn't have to go any further. We can. I said, shut up. I roared, the fury breaking loose, crashing over me like a wave. I lunged at him before I could stop myself, my fist connecting with his jaw so hard that I felt the bones crack under my knuckles. He stumbled back, crashing into the coffee table, blood pouring from his mouth. Emily screamed, rushing to his side. But I didn't care. I didn't care about anything anymore. I stood over them, breathing heavily, my fists still clenched, the pain in my knuckles barely registering. You think this is over? You think you can just apologize and make it all go away? I spat at him, watching as he tried to pull himself together, wiping the blood from his face. Aaron didn't say anything. He just looked up at me, fear flashing in his eyes for the first time. And in that moment, I knew I had power over him, over both of them. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The adrenaline from hitting Aaron was surging through me like a fire I couldn't control. I stood there, breathing heavily, staring down at him as he clutched his jaw, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Emily was on her knees beside him, sobbing, but I couldn't focus on that. All I saw was red. All I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. This wasn't enough. Hurting him once wasn't going to fix anything. You're sorry, I hissed, stepping closer to him. You think sorry is going to fix this? You think saying those words makes everything all right? Aaron struggled to get up, and when he finally stood, he avoided looking me in the eye. That spineless coward. He had always been the guy who could smooth talk his way out of anything. But not this time. He started to say, but I wasn't done. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall, my forearm pressing hard into his throat. Stop talking, I growled through gritted teeth. My body was trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer force of holding back the urge to do something much worse. Ryan, please. Emily's voice broke behind me, her sobs sharp and raw. Please stop. This isn't you. I turned my head just slightly, enough to see her through the corner of my eye. She was a mess. Hair tangled, face streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she reached out toward me. You don't get to tell me who I am anymore, I said, my voice cold and distant. Not after what you did. The betrayal was suffocating, wrapping around me like a noose, tightening with every second. My best friend, my wife, the two people I trusted the most. How could I have been so blind? I let Aaron go and stepped back, watching him stumble, gasping for breath. I could see the fear in his eyes now, real fear. He wasn't used to being on the losing end, wasn't used to facing consequences. For years, I had let him get away with everything. The lies, the jokes at my expense, the small betrayals. I'd brushed them off because I thought that's what friendship was. But this was different. This wasn't something you could laugh off or shrug away. I paced the room, my thoughts racing faster than I could control. The rage inside me was a living thing, growing with every second I spent looking at them. Aaron was still slumped against the wall, his hand pressed to his bloody mouth, but I could see he was trying to gauge his next move. Don't even think about it, I snapped, noticing how his eyes flicked toward the door. You don't want to do this, man, he said weakly, his voice cracking under the weight of his fear. We can We can work this out. I laughed bitterly. Work it out? Work it out? You've already worked out plenty with my wife, haven't you? Emily sobbed harder, but I didn't care. I was past caring. I had reached a point where my mind was only focused on one thing, revenge. But then something shifted in me, something darker. I knew hitting Aaron again wouldn't change anything. Breaking his jaw, pounding him into the floor, it wouldn't be enough. He'd heal. He'd move on. Maybe he'd even find some way to twist the situation, make himself the victim in all this. I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. I needed to do something he'd never forget. Slowly, methodically, I walked over to the fireplace and grabbed the iron poker that was resting against the brick hearth. I could hear Emily's breath catch in her throat as she realized what I was doing. Aaron, too, stiffened, his eyes widening in horror as I lifted the poker in my hand, feeling its weight. "Ryan, don't," Emily whispered, crawling toward me, her hands outstretched. "Please, you don't have to do this. We can fix this. We can." "We can what?" I said, my voice shaking with a cold fury. "Fix it? Tell me, Emily, how do you fix this? How do you fix years of trust, of love, of a life we built together gone?" She didn't answer. How could she? There was no answer to that. No way to mend the gaping wound they'd both torn into me. I turned to Aaron, who was now inching toward the door. My grip tightened around the poker, and before I could think twice, I hurled it across the room. It struck the wall beside him with a loud clang, and he froze, his body shaking with terror. "You're not going anywhere," I said through clenched teeth. He didn't respond, just stood there, breathing hard, his back pressed to the wall like a trapped animal. I walked toward him again, slowly this time, savoring the fear in his eyes. It was the first time in my life I'd ever seen him look powerless. And God, it felt good. "Ryan." Emily's voice was small now, almost a whisper. "Please, let's just leave. Let's just go home." "Home?" I turned to her, disbelief etched on my face. "Home? You think we can just go back to that house and pretend none of this happened? You think I can look at you, at our kids, and not see this? Every time I look at you, Emily, I'm going to see him." Her sobbing grew louder, but it didn't move me. Not anymore. She had made her choices. She had lied to my face, slept with Aaron, and then come home to me like nothing had changed. How long had she been planning this? How many times had they met at this cabin, laughing at how oblivious I'd been? I turned my back on both of them, standing there in the middle of the room, my breath shallow and rapid. The poker lay on the floor, but I didn't need it. I didn't need violence to make them pay. Instead, I took a deep breath and said the words that sealed their fate. "We're done." It was quiet at first, just a simple declaration, but the finality of it filled the room like thunder. Emily collapsed to the floor, her body racked with sobs, but I didn't even glance at her. I was done. With her, with Aaron, with all of it. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door. I didn't look back. Couldn't. If I looked at them one more time, I knew I'd lose control. The cold night air hit me like a slap when I stepped outside, but I welcomed it. It felt cleansing in a way, as if the weight of the cabin, the lies, the betrayal had stayed behind, trapped inside with them. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, filled with the image of Aaron's terrified face, Emily's desperate sobs, the sound of the poker hitting the wall. I should have felt relief. I should have felt something, but all I felt was empty. The drive home was a blur. My mind felt numb, disconnected from everything I had just done. The confrontation, the anger, the way Emily had crumpled to the floor in tears. It all felt like a bad dream I couldn't shake. But it wasn't a dream. It was real, and now I had to live with it. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. The kids were with Emily's parents for the weekend, which felt like a blessing in that moment. I wasn't ready to face them, wasn't ready to pretend everything was normal. I sat there for a long time, staring at the front door, trying to gather the strength to walk inside. How was I supposed to live here in this house after what had happened? Every room would be a reminder of Emily's betrayal, of the life I thought we had that was now gone. I wasn't sure I could do it. Eventually, I dragged myself out of the car and stepped inside. The silence was deafening. I stood in the foyer for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on me, suffocating. I felt hollow, like all the rage and pain had drained out of me, leaving nothing behind. I wandered through the house aimlessly, not sure what to do with myself. The kitchen, the living room, the kids' bedrooms, it all felt the same, yet completely different. It was like walking through a stranger's home, one that had once been mine but now felt foreign. I ended up in our bedroom, the place where so much of our life together had unfolded. I could still hear the echoes of our late-night talks, the laughter, the quiet moments when the kids were finally asleep. But now those memories were tainted. I couldn't picture any of it without seeing her with Aaron, without hearing her lies. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, trying to make sense of it all. How had it come to this? How had I let things spiral so far out of control? I thought back to the condom wrapper in the car, to the moment I had first realized something was wrong. Part of me wished I had never found it. Maybe ignorance really was bliss. Maybe I could have gone on living in a lie, if it meant avoiding this pain. But I knew that wasn't true. The truth had a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deep you buried it. And now that it was out, there was no going back. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, half expecting it to be Emily, begging me to come back, to talk, to fix what was broken between us. But it wasn't her. It was Aaron. I stared at his name on the screen, my pulse quickening with anger. After everything, after I had confronted them, after I had walked out, he had the nerve to call me? What could he possibly have to say? I wanted to ignore it, to toss the phone across the room and pretend it didn't exist, but my hand moved on its own, swiping to answer. What do you want? I growled into the phone, not bothering to hide the fury in my voice. There was a pause on the other end, the sound of Aaron's breathing heavy, shaky. Ryan, we need to talk. I think we've talked enough, don't you? My hand clenched the phone so tightly I thought it might break. Please, man, just hear me out. Hear you out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You slept with my wife, Aaron. You've been lying to my face for months. There's nothing left to say. I know I messed up, he said, his voice desperate. But there's more you need to know. It's not just about Emily. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. What was he talking about? What more could there possibly be? I'm done with your lies, I said. But there was a tremor in my voice now, a crack in my armor. Despite everything, I was curious. I wanted to know what he was hiding. Ryan, please, Aaron continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. This wasn't just some affair. Emily, she's been planning this. It wasn't just me. There's more. What the hell are you talking about? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. I can't explain over the phone. Meet me tomorrow. We'll talk. I'll tell you everything. I hesitated, my mind racing. Could this be true? Was Emily hiding even more from me? The thought of her being involved with someone else, of there being layers to this betrayal I hadn't even uncovered yet, made my stomach churn. I'll text you the details, Aaron said before hanging up, leaving me with 1,000 questions and no answers. I stared at the phone in my hand, the silence of the house closing in around me. What was I supposed to believe? Part of me wanted to dismiss Aaron's words as more lies, but another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than I had realized. I barely slept that night, my mind consumed with thoughts of what Aaron had said. The more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me, eating away at the last shred of peace I had left. By the time morning came, I had made up my mind. I needed answers. No matter how painful they were, I couldn't move forward without knowing the whole truth. The next morning, the house felt eerily quiet. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, but it brought no warmth, just the cold reality of what my life had become. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, waiting for the message from Aaron. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. Could I really trust anything he said after what he'd done? But what if there was more? What if Emily's betrayal ran deeper than I'd ever imagined? Finally, the message came. Meet me at the park off Route 9, 2 p.m. No one else. I stared at the text, a sinking feeling in my gut. The park. The one we used to take our kids to. The irony stung, but I couldn't afford to dwell on it. This was my chance to get the answers I needed, no matter how much they hurt. The hours dragged on until it was finally time. I got into my car, my stomach in knots as I drove toward the park. The place was empty when I arrived, just the faint rustling of trees in the wind and the occasional distant hum of traffic. I parked near the entrance and walked toward the picnic tables, scanning the area for Aaron. There he was, sitting on one of the benches, his head hung low, his posture tense. He looked rough, disheveled, dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't slept at all since our confrontation. Good. He deserved worse. I approached him slowly, keeping my distance. The anger was still there, burning just beneath the surface, but I kept it in check. For now. You've got 5 minutes, I said, my voice cold, emotionless. Aaron looked up, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw still swollen from where I'd hit him. He swallowed hard, like he was preparing for a fight, but he didn't get up. Ryan, I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to listen, he said, his voice low and hoarse. I'm here, aren't I? I snapped. Talk. He shifted uncomfortably, rubbing the back of his neck as if trying to ease the tension. I never wanted any of this to happen. You have to believe me. I didn't plan on falling for Emily. But when it started, I couldn't stop. I clenched my fists, my jaw tightening. This wasn't what I came here for. I didn't need more apologies. Get to the point. Aaron nodded, taking a deep breath. It wasn't just me. I wasn't the only one. My heart sank. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I had feared this was coming. What are you saying? My voice was barely a whisper now. He looked up at me, his face filled with regret. Emily's been involved with other guys. Not just me. She's been meeting people behind your back for months. Maybe even years. I felt the ground shift beneath me. My stomach twisted into knots, bile rising in my throat. You're lying, I spat, though I could hear the doubt in my own voice. You're just trying to make yourself look better. I'm not lying, he said, his voice cracking with desperation. I wish I was. I know it's hard to hear, but it's the truth. I took a step back, shaking my head, trying to process what he was saying. Emily? Multiple affairs? My mind raced with 1,000 questions. How could she have done this to me? How had I been so blind? Why are you telling me this now? I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. Why not just keep lying? Keep hiding like the coward you are? Aaron winced but didn't argue. Because I owe you the truth, man. After what happened at the cabin, I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I know I've messed up, but you deserve to know everything. Everything inside me felt like it was unraveling. My entire life, my marriage, my family, was crumbling before my eyes, and I had no idea what to do next. I wanted to scream, to punch him again, to make him suffer. But I knew none of that would fix what had already been broken. I stared at Aaron, my chest heaving with the effort of holding myself together. How long? Aaron looked away, shame washing over his face. I don't know for sure. A year? Maybe longer. I could hardly breathe. A year. All that time, all those moments with her. And I had never suspected a thing. The weight of it crushed me. Who else? Aaron hesitated, and I could see him struggling to answer. There's someone else. A guy from work. And one of the landscapers who came by the house last spring. I nearly doubled over in pain. The landscaper. The one I'd hired. I had introduced him to my family, trusted him around my kids. The betrayal was almost unbearable. Like someone had taken a knife and slowly twisted it in my gut. I didn't want to hear anymore. Couldn't. The words were like acid, eating away at the last fragments of my sanity. So you've all been laughing behind my back this whole time? I whispered, my voice thick with pain. While I was home with the kids. while I was trusting her. You were all just using me? Aaron shook his head quickly, his eyes wide with panic. No, man, it wasn't like that. Emily, she's messed up, Ryan. I don't know why she's doing this, but she's not the woman you think she is. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt like I was sinking, drowning in a sea of lies I hadn't even known existed. Every memory I had of Emily, of our life together, was tainted now, corrupted beyond repair. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice hoarse. Why are you telling me this? Do you think it's going to make me forgive you? Forgive her. Aaron didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, his face crumpled in regret. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I couldn't keep lying to you. I couldn't let you go on not knowing. I turned away from him, my hands shaking as I tried to hold back the tidal wave of emotions crashing inside me. Anger, pain, confusion, betrayal. I wanted to walk away. I wanted to run. But where would I go? How do you escape something that's inside you? Something that's poisoned every part of your life? I'm done, I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. Aaron looked up at me, his face pale. What? I'm done, I repeated louder this time. With you, with her, with all of this. I couldn't live in this nightmare anymore. I couldn't keep pretending there was something left to salvage, that there was a life I could go back to. That life was over. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving Aaron sitting there, his guilt and regret weighing him down like a stone. I didn't look back. The drive home was quiet, the roads empty, the air cold. I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not sadness, just numb. I was done. Done with the lies, the betrayal, the people who had torn apart everything I had once held dear. When I got home, the house was still dark and quiet, just like I had left it. I stood in the doorway for a moment, letting the silence wash over me. Then, without thinking, I picked up my phone and sent a single text to Emily. We're finished. I want a divorce. It was over, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit like and leave a comment with your favorite part. We'd love to hear your perspective.